Hello, artist Jamari here with another Wild Roots art video. In today's video, I'm going to be painting this gorgeous watercolor piece called Crossroads and telling you another fabulous story. So I've really gotten in the habit of smudging myself off before I start to create things. It's a part of my cultural traditions as a Native American, and it just makes me feel good as a creator to know that I have nice, clean, fresh energy when I go into a project. So here I am prepping the paper, and we'll get this painting started. So as I tell this story of the bedrest portion, I'm going to be painting this watercolor piece called Crossroads that was inspired by the crossroads I faced when I was on bedrest, when I had a decision to make of which direction I wanted to go down in my path to healing. So in the previous video, I stated that I had this whirlwind of a diagnosis for this neurological condition. I was going blind, and I went through a bunch of tests and different things to be diagnosed, and then had neurological surgery, and then everything abruptly stopped, and I was put on bed rest for a year and a half. And in the beginning of that bed rest period, I remember lying in bed contemplating. I was very young when I was diagnosed with this condition, when this whole experience happened. If you haven't watched that other video, I will link it below because I will be referencing it kind of throughout this. So if you want to know more, feel free to go back and watch that one. But I was clearly at this crossroad period when I was on bed rest, like I said in the very beginning. I don't know if I was meditating. I probably was, because I was doing a lot of practices like that at that time. But I remember visually seeing myself at this crossroads, and I could go in one direction, and it would be trusting the doctors and their diagnosis, which at that time was that I was going to be sick for the rest of my life. I was going to suffer with this neurological condition for the rest of my life, and eventually go completely blind and lose my eyesight totally. Or I could choose this other path, the path of a more unknown nature, where I believed in something higher than myself. I believed in something unseen and put all my faith into that, and believed that I would find a path to healing completely, and I could choose which path that I wanted to go down. So that's this painting and this drawing incorporates so well with this story. So when I was presented with this experience of this visual representation of this crossroads, I contemplated it for quite a while, both directions that I could have gone in. But ultimately, I did decide to choose the path of the unknown and go in the direction of faith and trust that I would not suffer with this condition for the rest of my life, but I would find a path to healing. So that path was long, and I did eventually find it, but it was a long path, and a part of that was this year and a half on bed rest. So the first part of this bed rest experience was extremely painful and extremely difficult. Some of the worst pain I've ever had in my entire life. I have had migraines off and on throughout my life, but the headaches that I would receive in the first part of this experience blew migraines out of the water. And if you suffer with migraines, you know that that's saying a lot. What was happening was my body had adjusted to these extremely high amounts of spinal fluid pressure within my cranium and my spinal cord. And what it was doing was putting extreme amounts of pressure on my optic nerves, which it was distorting my vision and should have ruptured my optic nerves. Luckily it didn't, but it was supposed to, the amount of pressure that I had. So what they ultimately did was put what's called a lumbar shunt in my lower spine that drained spinal fluid into my stomach and kept my body's spinal fluid levels at what was a normal rate instead of this extremely high rate of pressure that it had been at before. But what that said to my body was that I was in danger, and what it told my brain, who had had this cushion of extreme pressure for quite a while, that I didn't have any protection around my brain, that I didn't have protection around my spinal fluid, and it created extreme amounts of pain because it was screaming that there was no protection suddenly. So just to give you an example of what I mean by the difference in the pressure, When I was first diagnosed, they explained to me that normal spinal fluid pressure is between 50 and 80. I don't know what the comes after that. Just 50 and 80 was the amount that I was told. At the very most, in a typical healthy human, it's 150. When they did my spinal tap, my first spinal tap, my spinal fluid pressure was at 420. So it was extreme. It was very, very extreme. And the neurological and then the neuro-ophthalmologist and the neurologist that I was seeing's eyes, I should have gone blind. My optic nerve should have ruptured. But because they put what is called a lumbar shunt into my spine, that was the surgery that I had, that then drained the spinal fluid into my stomach and regulated it back down to that normal amount of pressure between 50 and 80, it made my body think that it didn't have any protection. And so that pain was produced. So the bed rest was to help my body adjust to the difference in the pressure and give my body and my brain specifically and my spinal column the time to understand and regulate itself back down to a normal pressure amount. But because that pain was so bad in the first parts of my recovery, I could barely go to the bathroom. Anytime I lifted my head or increased my elevation, stood up or anything like that, my brain would freak out and think that there was nothing protecting it, and the headaches were undescribable. And so I wouldn't be able to stand up. I would literally have to crawl to the bathroom to use the restroom. I could not take showers. I would have to take baths, and typically have someone help me because all the movement was too strenuous. When I went to see the doctors in the beginning, it would have to be totally set up where my mom would have to get the car ready, have this front seat of the car pushed all the way back so that the only period of walking I had was literally to the car from my house. I would get in the car, lay right down. That would be very excruciating. When I got to the doctor, they would be waiting for me, have a wheelchair available that was reclined as far as possible, and have a room that I could go directly into so that I could lay down immediately. And even in that transitional period, I would be suffering in excruciating pain. Talk about pain pill popping. I was on a lot of pain medication at that time, which was another blessing in disguise that I'll explain throughout the story. But it was serious. It was excruciating. I needed help. I couldn't do anything for myself in the beginning. I needed family and friends to be there to cook for me and help me do things and go to the store for me and do everything. And luckily, I have a wonderfully supportive family and some really amazing friends that were there and helped. But eventually, I did have to move home. At that time, I lived far away from, my direct family, my grandmother and my mom and all those people. So I ended up moving home, and living at my mom's house. She decided to try to reconcile with her ex-husband, my mother, and so I was left to stay in her home, and I got two friends to rent the house with me, lifelong friends, and we rented the house and I recovered. I recovered during that period, kind of on my own. I still had family and friends that were helping in certain ways, but predominantly I was on my own, and I was getting better and better. Didn't stay to the point where I couldn't walk or I couldn't go to the bathroom. I couldn't do those things forever. I was very young when I was diagnosed with this. And so I was very strong and my body was very agile and I was determined to get better. And so I pushed myself to start to do things and start to be able to, take care of myself because it was such a, difficult situation just to be a young adult, be freshly on my own, and then all of a sudden need all this help. It was just something that like I had to accept, I had to give into it. I remember that process as well. That was a difficult like mental process and a process that I had to accept myself that, I did have to give in to needing help. And I had to accept that I did need help for a period of time, but I knew that it wasn't going to be like that forever, and that part of my believing in something higher and stronger was trusting a path to healing, knowing that eventually I would be able to live on my own and be independent and be a normal young adult. And it was a crazy time because other things were happening simultaneously. This story is so in depth, and there's so many different facets to it that I will eventually write a book, just describing everything that happened because it's too much even to put in these two videos. But one of the things that happened simultaneously with my diagnosis was one of my very good friends was also diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease lymphoma. She was my same age. We were 21. So she was one of the very good friends that while I was sick and on bed rest, she would come and sit with me and we'd watch movies and talk and laugh and enjoy each other's company. She'd just come lay in bed with me, stay the night. We would just spend time together. But then when she started to go through her treatment period of healing for her cancer, I would go with her and I would go sit with her during her chemotherapy appointments and different things like that. So the environment that I was in was also kind of a push to get better because I was surrounded in a lot of ways by young people that were sick. And the reasons for that we figured out later. It took many, many years to kind of figure out why there was all these people that were sick in our community. We did. And those are things that, like I said, I'll go more in depth in the book when I get the chance to do that. But, at this time, my environment was just really pushing me to get better, find paths to healing. So, although I was on bed rest, I was slowly doing things that, were leading down my path to healing. I would get up more and more, be more social. A lot of friends would have to come to me, but that was okay. Just starting to take walks. At first I could only walk very short distances. I would get very exhausted. And I would just go a little bit further and a little bit further each time. It wasn't even like I was consciously doing these things. Looking back at it, I can see that I was doing so many of the right things. But at the time, I was not consciously doing these things. I was just doing what felt good. I was following what felt good to me. I was trusting myself. I was trusting in the unknown. I was trusting in something unseen. And I was believing in that and just following where that path led me. And it led to a lot of growth and healing. And by healing, I mean like emotional healing. At that time of my life, I had a lot of anger leading up to, my diagnosis and the surgeries and everything. I had been carrying a lot of anger inside of me. I was angry for a lot of reasons. Just felt like life wasn't fair for so many reasons. All the struggles I had been through, just a lot of different things that, we all go through. Sometimes we don't have even the words to explain it or the appropriate place to try to bring it up. We just don't know, and so we carry that around with us. And I had been doing that, and so a big part of it was what I had mentioned in the previous video, which is I started also reading. I had a lot of time on my hands and TV was boring to me. So I read. I read so many books and I didn't really read any nonfiction books. I mean, any fictional books. They no stories. I was reading all nonfiction books about quantum physics and different indigenous ideas and Eckhart Tolle books and different books by channeled beings, Barbara Marciniak books and God, just so many books. I really wish I would have started to write down all the books that I've read because at this point I just have no idea how many. There were just so many books, and these books were opening my mind and expanding my consciousness in a way that was allowing me to believe in something higher. It was giving me, in-depth explanations of different groups of people who believed in these things or different examples of, proof of it, just all different kinds of things, ways that you could prove it to yourself, experiences you could have in the present that would give you the experience of understanding the mysteries of life. So many different things that really helped to keep my mind in an expanded state while I was healing. And it was a divine thing. It was again like with, starting to slowly do things. My mom had a ton of books and I was bored and just started looking through them. And although she had moved out of the house to try to reconcile with her, it's my father's dad, it was my stepdad at some period. She had left all of her stuff in the house that me and my friends were in. So I had access to all of her books, years and years book collections, and she always had a beautiful collection of books. She had been an avid reader, she still is, and had collected tons of amazing books. So I had access to this information. It again wasn't something that I sought out or looked out for or tried to find. It wasn't like how it is today, where these things are widely talked about or everybody knows. Back then, they called these concepts New Age. If you wanted to find these books, you had to look in the New Age section at Barnes and Noble or whatever. Typically, they didn't even have a New Age section at the library. These ideas were things that I could only talk to certain people about. Some people thought it was too far out or thought I was crazy or being too like delusional or too fantastical with my thinking. I'm a Pisces, so that's totally something I do, but I knew that what I was believing in was real, whether they did or not. And then these books were helping to confirm that and giving me different tools that I could use to prove it to myself, to utilize it, to stay in the present moment, to, talk to the Great Spirit, to access that, all these different things. And so all those things were happening simultaneously throughout this year and a half that eventually led me to be able to get back on my feet. And I'm not going to pretend like all of the, there was a lot of hardships during that. I was seeing doctors continuously. I would still go through bouts of extreme pain and be in bed, where I could not get out of bed for extended periods of time. It was not this smooth sailing, easy journey. It was very difficult. And a lot of times when we look back at things, we either see kind of all the good or all the bad. And we have to combine both of those because both of them were the experience of the journey. So although it was challenging and very, very difficult, it was also beautiful and filled with blessings. And so I just want to acknowledge both of the aspects of that journey because they're both equally important. The hardships were just as important as the positive parts, and all of it led to the beautiful outcome of me finding my path to healing, but above all, trusting myself and trusting that I know the way, whether I'm conscious of it or not, and sometimes letting go. We can be control freaks in situations where things feel out of our control. We control all the little things that we can. And, one of the things of this situation, it taught me to just let go, to completely and totally let go and have that ultimate faith. And that was a blessing in disguise because it's something that I've never lost until this day. Another blessing in disguise was something I mentioned earlier where I was on a lot of pain medication during this period of time. What was also happening at the same time was the opioid epidemic, and so many of my good friends, these friends that I was such good friends with in the beginning of this process, ended up deeply hooked and addicted to opioids, which led then to further deeper drug abuse and addiction. And now some people have passed away. Luckily, because I had taken pain medication when I was sick, and that's what my conscious and subconscious attributed it to, was sickness, it was not something that I enjoyed to do in any way recreationally. I didn't like to just pop pills. I had to take them when I was sick, and so when I wasn't taking them, it meant that I was better. And that situation saved me from the opioid epidemic because everyone around me, all my closest friends at that time, ended up in one way or another hooked on those drugs. And just because of my personal experience, it let me not have that same experience and created this resistance that made me not have that addiction. I didn't get addicted to opioids, and it was a true blessing in disguise, another really serious blessing in disguise looking back. So again, even in some of our most challenging situations in life, some things that we have no idea what to do or how we're going to make it out of, we just have to have faith and let go and trust in ourselves and trust in something higher, that we will find our way out, and then it's just a part of our journey. And sometimes along our journey, we reach a crossroads. And the crossroads is just about us making the decision on which direction we're going to go into next. Sometimes it's in the direction of the known, and sometimes it's in the direction of the unknown. Just remember that it's your choice, And whatever you choose, it is the right choice because you made it. Have faith in that, trust yourself, and enjoy the journey. Well, we've reached the end of this journey together, and I hope you enjoyed this story. If you did, please like this video, subscribe to my page. I will definitely be sharing more of my stories, which are equally as entertaining and inspirational, and doing more pieces of art for you. So I appreciate any of the comments. If you have any relatable experiences or have any questions, please feel free to reach out. The artwork is also available. Typically, I can't always say the original is, but there's prints and different things. So if you're interested in that as well, I will either have my website connected below, or you can comment and I will let you know how to find that. I hope that you have a blessed day. And if you reach a crossroads, trust yourself in your decision. Until next time, we'll see you soon.